Hey, did you know that mindfulness, that is paying attention to what is happening to you and your body right now, can stop you making bad decisions? Welcome to Hey Did You Know, a podcast from Auckland University of Technology. Kia ora, my name is Mike Kilpatrick. I'm one of the hosts of this podcast, where we talk to academics about their expertise, some fun facts, and the things you need to know about their amazing work, as well as asking the questions you'd expect. I'll be throwing some random ones at our guests just to see what secrets I can reveal. Joining me today is Dr. Amy Errmann, Senior Lecturer, Marketing and International Business in the AUT Business School. Amy describes herself as an enthusiastic consumer advocate whose work is driven by consumer well-being. She is curious about the psychological mechanisms that nudge people into making decisions about what to buy or use, as well as the broader cultural and sociological practices of consumers. Her work also looks at new technologies, particularly digital consumption, and the development and response to novel tech. She's also the proud owner of a retired racing greyhound. Welcome, Amy.
Morena, thank you.
Lovely to have you here. As we do with all our guests, I've asked you to think about a random fact just to see if you can blow me away in the first few minutes of the podcast. What's your random fact?
So I did a lot of thinking about this, and I'd love you to take a guess before I tell you the answer.
Okay.
So if we take the, let's say, 1 minute of could be typical work day, how many thoughts do you think pass through your head?
I'm going to say 10.
That's a good guess. So research has shown it's about 4 to 6 major thought changes per minute.
Okay.
So they're maybe not counting little minutiae where we might, dovetail somewhere from a kind of a major thought, and that's over 4,000 in a day. So paying attention to your brain and your mind and your thought process, I think, can give you a lot of insight into yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talk about cognitive attention system. What do you mean when you talk about cognitive attention systems? Is it just how our brain processes and works in kind of day-to-day life?
Yeah, so our brain is kind of built like a computer in a lot of ways. So we process information. We typically will process things through our 5 senses. That's how information enters our kind of physiological landscape. But cognitive attention is really about specifically our mental processes. And the way that I best describe attention systems through giving a bit of a metaphor so that in perfect layman language everyone can understand is our attention systems work through either what we call spotlighting or floodlighting. So spotlighting will be, let's say you're walking with a flashlight and it's showing just this small spot on the wall.
Yeah.
So that's when we're paying attention to really specific details. So if you think of, let's say, consumer language, it might mean when we're in our phone and we're really focused on what we're doing and we're paying attention, we don't feel distracted. And then there's something called floodlighting, which means that our attention is kind of scattered over a broader area. So it'd be as though you're at a circus and they take the big floodlight down and you can see all the actors, right? So our attention is scattered in multiple ways. And I think another good way of explaining this again is, now the new trend of people on their phone and watching TV and talking to someone across the room at the same time, your attention might be in multiple places at once.
Yeah.
And it's not that one is better than the other. It's just that through these types of attention, we can actually understand we might make different decisions based on if we're really close to information and we're able to observe and process what we're doing in a more slow way versus maybe making quicker, distracted, impulsive decisions.
Are we getting worse at making decisions because we're not focusing attention? We think about the gains that smartphones have given us in terms of having the computing power in your pocket and the ability to search the internet, all that kind of stuff. But there seems like a downside there as well, that the distraction could actually make things worse.
Yeah. So you can think about it a couple different ways. Some research has shown we might make more impulsive decisions. Mm-hmm. So when we think about, let's say, some decisions are based over time. So we might make a decision that's best for us right now versus if we were to wait 5 years in the future and actually kind of what we call delayed gratification in research, but wait down the road, it might be better for us. So I'll take food as an example, as kind of, we can have that juicy burger right now versus maybe you eat a salad and it will be better for you in the long run.
Yeah.
So impulsiveness is one thing. Also, we rely a lot more on our heuristics, which just means we make mental shortcuts to make decisions faster Because if we're overstimulated by information, and I think online shopping is probably a great example of this, where you're trying to click through the cart so quickly just to be able to get the task over and done with, that you really are truly relying on your memory processes and things you already know in order to kind of do that task. So I have a couple pieces of research where I look differently, for example, at bias and heuristics than I would at, let's say, how we might make decisions based on our thought process around time.
How does our cognitive attention system, like, how does that shape time perception and bias? Like, what's actually happening when we're kind of struggling to process all that kind of information?
Yeah, so one of the latest articles I did looked at specifically mindfulness. So mindfulness sounds quite elusive as a term, because a lot of people might think mindfulness is about, let's say, Buddhism, which means that it might change our values. But there's also other ways of looking at mindfulness that specifically target, let's say, levels of focus, attention on our breath, which might then place attention on our body, observation. So we're able to slow down and observe the environment around us. So I have one piece of research that actually looks at how does mindfulness change the way we subjectively think about time, and in doing so, might it change the decisions we make that are based on how we think about time?
Yeah.
So something we found through the experiments, which was really interesting, is that when you put someone into, let's say, a 2-minute meditation, and you ask them to focus on their breath, their body sensations, most of them will say, that felt like an hour. That felt really long.
Okay.
Time felt long.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just that it felt as though time was dragging. And when you look at the literature, more of the science literature, not so much marketing, the reasoning for it is that they're noticing that they're actually processing information. So it's kind of called perceptual density. But when we think about, let's say, how many smells you take in per minute, or how many different visual fields. If you're actually noticing these things passing by, you're basically extending that out, and you're feeling as though time's taking longer versus, let's say you're scrolling on your smartphone, an hour can seem like 5 minutes. So it's the opposite effect.
Yep.
So it actually can speed up how fast time feels. So one of the things that we played around with in this prediction is that when people feel as though time takes longer, and it has nothing to do with clock time, it's just subjective, they can either get impatient or, and what we found, is they can actually feel time rich. So really interesting. So we were thinking it could be these two opposing predictions, because there has been research that shows that when time feels long, people can become impatient.
Yep.
But it's normally under conditions where there's a negative anticipation.
Okay.
So they're kind of stimulated in a negative way, versus with mindfulness is neutral and or positive. So they felt time rich, which means they didn't mind waiting to actually get that like a delayed choice in the future.
Yeah.
So really, really interesting. So we looked at financial choices specifically.
Yeah.
So we would say, you'll get $2 today in a savings account, versus if you wait 4 months, you'll get $10 into a savings account. Those are not an actual example of one of the experiments, but just to give you a hypothetical. So we looked at financial decisions. So this could influence how we do banking, what types of rewards we wait for as consumers when, let's say, you're faced with online rebates, these types of things.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to that in just a second. But I'm interested in mindfulness. It's something I've done. One of the reasons I held back for so long was this kind of the perception, this kind of, you touched on already, this perception of mindfulness. And I wonder if people, as a branding problem, people think it's maybe a little bit woo or like, they don't really understand it. But it's actually a technique that can help consumers make better decisions, right? If you use it wisely. How should people start? Do you have a way that you think people should start to use mindfulness as a kind of way into it?
Absolutely. I think it depends on what you would want to achieve. So if you're looking for, let's say, a scientific or a neutral perspective without any spiritual overlay, there's some fantastic apps. So Headspace is probably the biggest one. There's another app called Waking Up that's done by actually a neuroscientist, which is really interesting. And what they do is they essentially try and get people to really become observant, non-judgmentally, of what emotions are passing through, what thoughts are passing through, what physical sensations, with the ultimate aim being that you eventually learn that everything passes. Nothing is permanent.
Yeah.
So you're more able to either let negative things go or, decrease rumination. Sometimes people tend to ruminate. I think this is a common problem, especially now given just how much information we're faced with.
Yeah.
You might have a problem on your mind, or let's say you read a nasty news article and you notice your brain start to going in circles thinking, oh, I can't believe that politician did that, whatever the case is. Mindfulness is really a tool that helps you realize this is something that's fleeting. It's not necessarily important. It's not attached to some identity system. You're able to let it go. The reason why it's so effective is when you start practicing, you can actually start to notice these thoughts arise. Versus when you're in default state, your brain could be going a mile a minute and you might not have any knowledge about it. It's a fantastic way for those of us I'm very mentally stimulated a lot. I have the perfect job for that. But for me, it's a really good way to slow down and realize that I don't have to rush all these things, or I don't have to get caught in this mental trap over the circular thinking. Yeah. Yeah.
Like in your research, have you found that brands are using or trying to take advantage of mindfulness as a way to sell their goods and services to consumers?
Yeah, there's I did a paper about, maybe it might have come out last year, but it got accepted about 3 years ago, and actually looked at how mindfulness is used in advertising, which is really interesting. So for those listening, and even for you, pay attention to the ads that you start seeing. Specifically, it could be just nudged static ads, but also TV commercials and videos on social, because they're embedding mindfulness into those. And what I mean by that is they're taking things like breath cues. So they'll say, slow down, take a breath, notice your environment, and then they'll move on with the commercial. Or they might take such tactics as there's certain ways you can elicit mindfulness with processing. So they might slow down the ad, do a lot of nature visuals, use really relaxing music is kind of another tactic. Or embed it into apps, for example. So, take a pause for a mindful moment. And even if you're outside, not looking at your phone, but just out on the street in retail stores, you'll start to see these mindful spaces now are in a lot of different locations. They're in airports. I was in Louisiana, and they actually had a mindfulness campaign on public transit to try and reduce the amount of violence.
Wow.
So it was basically, they had a mindfulness meditation playing on the buses and on the trains and and the tube. And it would say, take a deep breath, be friendly to those around you. It was really interesting. So I actually looked it up, and I have I loved it. I even contacted them. I have the whole campaign saved. So you're seeing this in a lot of areas. And I think to your question, most of the time it's probably used in a positive way. Yeah. But there definitely are probably situations where someone might want to prompt mindfulness to sell a certain product or something like that.
So it can be used to manipulate people?
Yes, I think so. I think, because you're starting to see there's a movement in the 70s, the slow move movement. It didn't start, it's not the same as mindfulness, but it takes the same principles. So looking at your food before you eat it, savoring it, taking your time with it. And you're seeing all of these industries now pop up around that kind of slow movement. So there's slow food, slow exercise. It kind of goes into the whole wellness thing. There's even slow academia is a thing, which is really interesting. So I would say it's not nefarious that they're manipulating us. I think these companies are probably taking advantage of some type of trend that's happening. Yeah. And they're jumping on the bandwagon. So it's not just about food. It's about, the slow food and eating slowly. Yeah.
Well, we're going to come back to mindfulness in just a minute. But first of all, I'm going to get you to roll our 20-sided die, because I'm going to throw a random question at you.
All right.
Number 2, if you were a flavour of ice cream, what flavour would you be?
Oh, so my favorite flavour is... here it's called Goody Goody Gumdrops. Yep. In Canada, it's called bubble gum. So I would say I would be that flavor.
Like some hidden delights.
Yeah, hidden delights. And I also think kind of childlike still, curious and childlike. Because my friends say to me, they're going, you're eating Goody Goody Gumdrops? That's kind of the flavor profile for a 5-year-old. But I go, no, when I eat something that's maybe considered unhealthy, I want it to be the most... artificially flavored thing, which sounds really crazy, but I just think when I'm going to have a treat, I'm going to have a real treat.
So one of my problems, I convinced myself that I need to buy something and I need to buy it now. And this is going to solve all my problems. And then I buy it and I'm like, great, I bought it. And now I'm like, I don't actually really need it, or this has not been the best decision. I get the feeling that mindfulness, putting some mindfulness into that process could actually really help me.
Yeah.
Is that how consumers should use it to for the most advantage?
Absolutely. So there's research that shows that with consumption, it's actually the positive anticipation before we buy something that stimulates our reward mechanisms.
Okay.
And so they actually I didn't do this study, but there's a famous study that was done with chimpanzees. And what they did is it was basically a button where you could get orange juice from. So you'd press the button and then they would get orange juice in this cup. And when they were studying their dopamine, what they found was that in the beginning, the chimps would press the button, the orange juice would come out and they'd drink it. And that's where they'd get their dopamine rush. But the further they did it, they actually got the dopamine rush before they hit the button. So it was this anticipation of, I know this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And they actually got the gratification before they did it. And that's the similar things to what's happened with us when we shop.
Yeah.
So when we shop, you could say window shopping, you get this really, I do too. I get this excited, I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna use it. It's like you're almost, it's kind of like how you feel after a workout.
Yeah.
You feel really buzzed, and then you buy the product and you think, did I really need that? So I think practicing mindfulness, again, going back to this notion that nothing is permanent, things change, your emotions will change. I think once you really have true knowledge of that, you will realize that this product, it's not going to make you happy. It might be a fantastic product and you should buy it because you're going to use it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't buy it, but if you're buying it to make you happy, it's the wrong way to think about it.
Yeah.
So I think once we're in control and objectively can understand those thoughts and feelings, that rush we get before we buy, we might say, oh, great, I've had the rush. I actually don't need to buy it.
This would have been useful for me about 4 weeks ago before I bought my gym membership.
Yes. Well, hey, if you're using your gym membership, hopefully you're getting some use out of it.
Do we need to slow down? Is there too much going on? Do we actually kind of literally take a breath? Do we need to not be as busy as we actually are?
I think it's a great question, and I don't think it's necessarily about busyness, because sometimes people who are quite busy are extremely good at managing their time, and they're actually paying attention to those tasks that they have, that they want to achieve in that time. I think it's a matter of being able to understand, are you engaged during the tasks, the things that you're doing?
Yeah.
So, for example, when you're with family, are you actually with family, or are you in your head, 10 miles away going, oh, I have to do this thing for work tomorrow, or I had this really horrible conversation with a friend and I can't get over it. So it's a way of actually learning how to be present in the moment that you're in, even if it's a negative moment, or you're having a horrible conversation with someone, you're at least there. There's another piece of research that we haven't discussed that actually looks at less about the time, but more about our predictions and heuristics based on the information that we have when we are feeling kind of overloaded or time crunched. Mm-hmm. So this was part of my PhD, and what I did is, one of the things we're noticing here in our country, but also abroad, is that people are becoming a bit polarized in terms of where, let's say, you're going to donate based on, let's say, political affiliation. So in the U.S., which is where we really looked at, a lot. If you're, let's say, more of a liberal, you're going to donate to, the World Wildlife Fund, versus if you're a conservative, you'll go more towards the Salvation Army, for example. Oh, yeah. And there's reasons for that in terms of the types of emotional appeals they make. Mm-hmm. So liberals are more about equality and fairness, versus when you lean a little more conservative, it's more about purity, in-group protection. Yeah. So what we did is, and there's research showing this, and it's not contentious at all. It's just that we have different leanings and different types of emotions, and appeals will work differently, right? Yeah. So what we did is we actually got both liberals and conservatives to do a mindfulness meditation. We also had a control group, which we always do. It's very important to make sure that your effects work. Yeah. And then we had them make a political donation. And those that had gone through not to a political party, but to a nonprofit that leans right or left politically. Yeah. We noticed that both conservatives and liberals were open to opposing appeals that they normally would just completely reject. And then we thought, I wonder what the mechanism behind that is. So we tested a variable. It's called openness to experience.
Yeah.
And what that means is it means you're open to different mindsets, different opinions. And that was the variable that it showed this was working through. That was the pathway. Because at first we thought, is it only conservatives that might, say, oh no, we're definitely restrained because they are very in-group oriented?
Yeah.
It was actually both liberals and conservatives. So in their default state, they would just reject ads that they typically would say, oh, this is not for me. This is a different political leaning. And then when they undergone mindfulness, they were more open to it. So I think in terms of your comment about being in the moment and, what happens to us when we're overloaded, because we did also test what we call cognitive overload. So we overloaded the participants with lots of things to remember, and the effects started going away. So when we do become stressed out, I think if you're just new to mindfulness, it might actually, the stress might override.
Yeah.
But I think the more you practice, the more robust you get.
One of the things I've noticed that you've also studied is luxury consumption. I'm really interested in this. And you did some work looking at a trip, like an eco trip to the Faroe Islands. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that came up with a colleague of mine. She's at Copenhagen Business School. And when she was in her PhD, she got some funding to look at why tourists go to the Faroe Islands. So right now, globally, there's this chronic issue of over-tourism. So people will basically see one place on social media, they'll get really excited about it. Let's say a couple places in Spain have this problem, and you'll just get overloaded with people there. Versus when you look at the Faroe Islands as a model, they get tourists, but they kind of get, as the politicians here would call, they say the right type of tourist, which means higher quality, spending more, but actually learning about the environment before they go, learning about the culture, the systems, the traditions, all of that.
Yep.
So we did this big study in the Faroe Islands to start looking just ethnographically at what types of practices the tourists and the visitors were doing. And then we started noticing that because they had put so much effort into planning their trip and these types of experiences, they were actually really mindful about what they were doing.
Yep.
So when they would go out to a restaurant, they would practice, slow eating and focusing on every dish and learning about the history of the dish and the ingredients. So they might end up in some ways probably going out less because the restaurants were quite expensive, some Michelin star.
Yeah.
But they'll remember that experience for a really long time. And it was the same with outdoor activities. So they would, let's say, go on a hike and they would learn about what type of landscape are you allowed to walk on versus not. And I think, wow, if you think of some of the backpackers or people that go to places, quite often you have to have security guards saying you can't enter this area, you can.
Yeah.
So it's a really good example, I think, of a country that has done tourism really well. And they do have that mindfulness element almost built into the whole experience.
How can we kind of use those kind of similar tactics here?
So one of the things I've noticed the tourism board doing, I think it's a fantastic initiative. They have this new campaign called I believe it's called the Tiaki Promise or the Kai Tiaki Promise. But you see, they've done a really good job because it's what we call in marketing 360, which means you're seeing the same visuals over and over. So I'll take you through the path. So if I'm a tourist coming, let's say I'm coming from China, I'm going to see a video on Air New Zealand about this Tiaki Promise. So when I visit this country, here's the customs, here are the different cultures that exist, here are the traditions, here's how you should treat the land, and where's the responsible place to put your rubbish, all of that.
Yeah.
So you'll see a video on the plane, and then as soon as you get on the plane, they had same video, slightly different, but same idea, same visuals, playing at the carousel where you pick up your baggage.
Yeah.
And I even noticed that in the car rentals, they were also giving out basically little pamphlets.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a matter of educating people on the way here. And I think it was a really good campaign. But there's also this broader, I think, cultural shift that would need to change because we have a history of people coming and car camping is a big thing. And if the facilities aren't set up, you end up with a lot of mess and it's just systems aren't made to hold that. So I imagine that's more of a regulation type problem where they would have to limit the amount of people parking or provide paid rubbish facilities. But I do think that just from my marketing brain on, I think that the education and the social change is probably more important to give to people than just here's what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do.
Yeah. The thread that kind of joins all this together is I guess if you're putting more thought, you're more mindful about your decisions, you're likely to make, I guess, on the balance of things, make slightly better decisions or be more invested in what you're doing. That allows you to maybe enjoy those kind of things more. So like if I book a holiday to Australia without even thinking about what I'm going to do versus, I plan to go to Samoa, but I know exactly what I'm going to do and I know the restaurants I'm going to eat, I'm probably going to enjoy that experience more than...
Yeah. And there was, in the research we had, there was a preparation element as well. So it could be that, let's say you're going to a religious site. It could just be understanding the history and the importance of it, which would actually, I think, give people a better experience, even if they weren't affiliated with whatever that spiritual overlay or religion was. So I think that understanding, being prepared, and yes, being more thoughtful, which can be difficult to do in the times we're faced with because we have so much information flying at us. So it's a matter of having priorities of what you're going to pay attention to.
Yeah. We're going to move on to something slightly different in a little second, but I'm going to get you to roll the dice again because I want to ask you another question.
Oh, 3. I'm going from 2 to 3.
Okay, what's the movie you've watched more than any other?
I think the most watched movie would have to be The Goonies.
Well, no, that's a blast of the past.
That is a blast because I grew up with 3 older brothers,
Yep.
and so I was consuming media that was probably, I was just old enough to understand.
Yeah.
And one of the movies we were allowed to watch when we were young was The Goonies, and I actually watch it with my partner's kids. They loved it. It's a great story about adventure, friendship, acceptance. I think it's a really good,
Do you remember that, wanting to be the characters with your brothers and stuff, like playing outside and having adventures?
Oh, totally. Yeah. We picked the characters that were most like us.
Yeah.
Which is, really funny. And then another one probably would be any of the older Indiana Jones movies.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of that when I was younger.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an Indiana Jones, was kind of an aspirational figure.
Another piece of research you've done that I'm really interested in is you've done some work on booze-free beverages, and this is something I think we're seeing more and more as people make decisions about what they want to drink and not drink. What has your work kind of taught you about our kind of consumers' thoughts about booze-free beverages?
So I haven't done hard research on this as per, let's say, a publication. More of my publications around novel foods, but I have done some kind of deep research into this space. So what we're noticing, which is really interesting, is that younger generations are drinking less. Mm-hmm. That's one of the kind of biggest findings. Because I think back to when we were young, there was a behavior change that adults were trying to instill, which was please stop, wanting to drink when you're underage.
Yeah.
We had a bit of the opposite problem. And now, we're seeing a big drop in both general kind of, we'll say social drinking, but also in problematic drinking of young people, which is a good thing, I think. The social drinking is interesting because you do still want to encourage, I think, younger generations to get together and be social and not just sit in a circle texting each other.
Yeah.
But I think that the drop in alcohol is most likely related to the way that they also grew up, in that they grew up a bit more, I don't want to use the word helicopter parent, but they were a bit more controlled. They had more strict schedules, probably more extracurricular activities that they were just meant to do.
Yeah.
Is also a little bit more of a competitive landscape for them as well. And so I imagine that being in control is one of the big psychological factors that is why they're kind of aversive to alcohol. Another demographic, which is really interesting, is that when we think of what the country will look like in 10 to 20 years, most of the new people joining us are coming from, India, China, and then also some kind of Southeast Asia. And a lot of these types of demographics either don't really drink a lot for cultural and spiritual reasons, but also physiological reasons. A lot of my friends from China, if they have a beer, they'll say, oh, I feel a bit flushed. It doesn't metabolize the same way.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you look at a lot of the companies and what they're doing to provide new types of products to consumers. So there's lots of really interesting mocktails coming out, lots of zero alcohol beer, which I think is a good offering to have. But you think, and then the third demographic, was the elderly. So the kind of baby boomers, so let's say 60 plus, they're still drinking, but they're drinking less because of this wanting for longevity.
Yeah.
Because people are living longer than ever before. They want to try and remain robust into old age and be able to play with grandkids. So they're saying, being a little more responsible, maybe I'll just have that one wine and not two.
You've also looked at future foods and our kind of attitudes to future foods. I'm thinking about things like, will we be eating bugs, like, ground cricket flour and like meats grown in the lab? Are we ready for that kind of stuff to be in the supermarkets, do you think?
So this was I've been working on this for about 7 or 8 years. And I have a lot of partners that I'll work with at some of the crown corporations who are doing this work.
Yeah.
And we did a really big piece of global research where we looked at different types of future foods. So it could be things like cell-based meat or precision fermentation. So if you think, let's say, you can culture yogurt, you might be able to culture other things like, this sounds kind of gross, but it could be that you're culturing pate that's made out of chicken breast, for example.
Yeah.
There's other things such as, the different alternative proteins like bugs that you mentioned. And then there's ways you can optimize food with using AI and algorithms and all of that. So what we found that's fascinating is that in Australia and New Zealand, and kind of I'll say westernized countries in general, because we're a bit further technologically developed, people are a bit skeptical towards these types of things.
Okay.
So we held, I think overall we had about, it would have been about over 40 to 50 focus groups, if you take into consideration how much we did worldwide. So you might have someone from rural Australia saying, I've always grown up with cows next to the field. What would this look like if I was getting my meat from, if there's a big factory doing cell meat beside me? They're also skeptical of the health. Is it going to be the same? Will it taste the same? And when we went, particularly Vietnam, I'll have to say was the most optimistic country. For them, these types of technologies could pull their country forward economically.
Yeah.
So I would say the vast majority of people we spoke to were even willing to say, the farmers can find other jobs. We want these things to help us, like it can reduce pollution, because you think of how much pollution they have compared to what we breathe in when we were walking outside.
Yeah.
Just the different types of, cars they drive. There's lots of different types of particles when you walk into the air, you notice it. So they say if this can help with our environment, if it can help with, the amount of pesticides that they're using on the land, they were all for it. I was actually in shock at how enthusiastic they were. They basically signed me up. I think that these types of foods, they're making really great scientific headway, but it's the work that we've been focused on is understanding if there are barriers, it might not even be a barrier on, flavor or taste. The barrier might be that you're skeptical because maybe you're skeptical of vaccines, and then that leads into that you're skeptical of something that would be developed in the lab, right?
Yeah.
So there's psychological barriers that I think we have that are different by country that we can focus on to kind of understand how will this look in the future, because you can't force people to eat food that might be better for the planet.
Yeah.
So how can you actually provide kind of positive appeals and positive rationalized reasons for them?
It's interesting to me as well. I'm vegan. I'm vegan for moral reasons rather than any health reasons. And I can't answer that question about if I know this hasn't come from an animal, would I eat a steak? I can't quite process that thinking in my brain just yet.
We actually have a paper on that. It was there's a good thing you bring it up. We have a paper. I think it's in the journal Appetite, but we basically looked at different ethical appeals that might actually be really new for people because they didn't have this opportunity before. So when you take veganism, you might have an environmental vegan. You might have someone's doing it for moral reasons for animal welfare. You might even have someone who's doing it culturally, right? Yeah. So different types of appeals might work. And so for someone who's, let's say, if it's a moral thing and not necessarily cultural, they go, oh yeah, I would love to maybe have a steak if there was no animal being harmed in the process. Yeah. So it's a really interesting way to think about how do our ethical frameworks change in the future as well.
When we're thinking about mindfulness and how we can apply it to our day-to-day lives and take advantage of the things that will help with, that this is not something you can necessarily pick up and become. You're not an expert in it. You don't do one mindfulness session and therefore it's going to solve all your problems. You need this is something you need to apply to your day-to-day.
The first encounter I had with it is I went to one of those 10-day Vipassana retreats where you don't talk for 10 days. You meditate for about almost 15 hours a day. So
Wow.
kind of 4 a.m. to kind of 9 p.m. And you're not allowed to talk to people, make eye contact. It was really, and so for some people that might struggle with anxiety or rumination or it was really intense. And that was I'd known about mindfulness, but I thought I'm just going to jump in and you get the training in the evenings. Like it's a good way to get the overview, but sometimes people can't handle it and they leave. So I suggest for if I could go back in time for the average person, just try doing a 5-minute breathing exercise and see how it makes you feel. Or even watch a 3-minute explanation of mindfulness on YouTube and then or even at the end of a yoga or a workout, just take 2 minutes to do breathing exercise, focus on your breath, and you'll probably start to notice that the more in tune you become with your thoughts and, your physical sensations, you have the ability to say, okay, this thought is occurring, it will pass, and I don't have to give it any weight.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's next? What are you working on now that's kind of really exciting you?
There's one thing that I'm really keen to start, and that's when we make decisions, a lot of our decisions are now going to be mediated through AI. So what I mean is, let's say that you open up your banking app, whatever bank you bank with, and you're thinking, oh, where do I want to put my KiwiSaver? Do I want to put it into a growth fund or a conservative fund? Soon, we're going to start seeing these little where they're called robo-bots, and banking bots pop up giving you financial advice, let's say. We're going to start seeing this overlaid in all aspects of our lives. So not just financial decisions. This will probably be everywhere. And I think one of the things that research hasn't looked at yet is when we evaluate information, typically we've evolved to do that through human interaction or at least digestible pieces of information versus if you've ever interacted with a chatbot, you can ask it one little question and it will come back with 2,000-word answer. And our brains are not equipped to process that level of information.
Yep.
So then what's happening is we end up with heuristics, or we'll maybe take 2 keywords out of there that resonate with us and we'll say, okay, that'll be what I'm going for. I'll move forward with this. And when it comes to high stakes decisions, for example, financial decisions, I don't know if that's actually the best model. So one of the things I'd love to look at in the next few years is there a way that we can actually just improve people's evaluation of digitally AI-mediated advice when it comes at that type of scale and speed? So that's one of the next things because I think, the current government, and rightly so, has a big agenda to want to speed up this process and how AI is used in businesses so that we don't run behind as a country competitively. So I just think that as humans, most people might not be equipped yet. So we have to make sure that we're not moving too quickly.
Well, I look forward to talking to you about that. We do have one final question we ask of everyone in the podcast. What do you think's the best thing about your job?
I think it's I love the teaching side of it. I think that fills my kind of emotional happiness. I love working with students and being able to help and support them. I think the thing that's really captured me research-wise, because I came from industry back in academia, was how big my ideas can go. Because I feel like we're entrepreneurs as academics. The world is our oyster in terms of how much research we can do, if it's, of course, cost effective, but funding applications, who you partner with, all of that. So I think for me, I have a brain that tends to go to a lot of different ideas, and I can work on them in one time frame.
Yeah.
And I think this job really allows me to do that. So that's what I love about it.
Well, I'm glad you love your job. I mean, that's a big thing, and I look forward to finding out more about all the research you're doing. But in the meantime, thank you so much for explaining a bit more about mindfulness and how we can apply it, and maybe some things we need to watch out for as well. Great.
And I'll put a plug in for if anyone's looking for a dog, highly recommend Greyhound, an ex-racer.
What's your dog called?
Jerry.
Jerry.
Yeah. He's lovely.
On that positive note, thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Amy. I'm away to practice mindfulness in the hope that it will save me spending all my money before I need to pay my bills. Thank you for listening to Hey Did You Know, an AUT podcast. Knowledge that works. Please rate, review and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform, and send your feedback and questions to media@aut.ac.nz. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new guest, more random facts, and the Die of Destiny as we seek what you need to know about the work we do at Aotearoa's University of Technology. Until then, stay informed.